This is the Dzogchen Sunday Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For multiple decades, I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each school of meditation so that you would not have to. Excuse me. It is Qui-Gon early Tuesday morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi after exploring PTSD and strolling meditation. This following technique is ideal for survivors of war, domestic abuse, as well as child abuse. In Dr. Tom Hartman's book, Walking Your Blues Away, he explained that the chief mechanism at play in PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is our friend, the hippocampus. Excuse me. Which is very much like a self-important doorman behind the velvet rope, armed with a clipboard. And if your name isn't on the list, you ain't getting in, regardless of how pretty, famous, or generous you might be. Similarly, the only thing that separates our experience of sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like, including emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings, from memories, is their relationship to the hippocampus. As long as we're on the wrong side of the velvet rope, as long as an event is on the wrong side of the velvet rope, our central nervous system is going to experience it as the present moment, regardless of how loud the front of our brain shouts that, no, this happened a year ago, or a decade ago, or more. Conveniently, simply by walking, we can soothe our hippocampus simply through the method of the asymmetric gentle stimulation provided by gently swinging our arms as we stroll around the block. Now, if we're in turmoil, I would venture to say that crossing a busy intersection is not going to be the safest choice. Therefore, if we are in great turmoil, I recommend strolling simply around our block. It may be boring, but it's safe. And speaking of safe, a lot of people, especially women, don't feel safe outside. And that's perfectly understandable. And in that scenario, a treadmill, it will suffice, because you'll still be providing asymmetric stimulation to your hippocampus, but without having to deal with humanity. Although there is a distinct possibility that your household pets will judge you. There is nothing special about strolling. Every time we walk, every time we step forward with our left foot, our right arm intuitively swings forward and vice versa. So here's something to keep in mind. Some people would say, be like a robot, be like the Terminator monster, and robot and just stare straight ahead. But that's not natural. It's natural for our eyes to go all over the place where we're walking. We're checking for dog doo, we're checking for roots, we're checking for mud. We don't want to slip and fall in something warm and smelly. And that actually assists in the asymmetric stimulation of the central nervous system necessary for processing trauma. Something we can do to really kick it up a notch is talk to ourselves. No, not affirmations. It's simple. As we inhale, we can silently and mentally recite the verb watch. As we exhale, we can silently and mentally recite the verb rest. This exercise will not erase your past, but it will help you to process the past. And it'll change our experience of trauma from something happening in Technicolor in the first person to a fading photograph. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Let's turn our attention to the mindfulness and meditation of clarity and letting go. As I mentioned a few moments ago, as we passively notice air enter our nostrils, I invite you to silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb watch. And as we passively notice the breath exiting your nostrils, I invite you to silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb rest. I'm sure you heard me use the word passive. There's a reason for that. For if we make the mistake of actively focusing on our nostrils, we'll probably, trip and fall, no less overwork the front of our brain, which triggers our amygdala, which further triggers our amygdala, the seat of anxiety and aggression. So instead of making that bonehead play, what we're going to do is we're going to treat our nostrils the way a piano student treats their metronome. We're going to hold them in passive peripheral awareness, purely using them for timing. Now, of course, the moment you have a specific question about the philosophies or techniques that support mindfulness and meditation, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check for questions about once every 13 minutes or so. Oh, a question. How nice. So I'm going over here and I'm going to tap button 8. Well, that's lame. Let's go over here and tap the studio screen. There we go. So, good morning, Samton. The individual wrote, Samton wrote, my problem, more than anger, is excessive lust, and I have difficulty to deal with it. You have some advice? Thank you. Yes, yes, I do. So, if you feel like you're climbing the walls from lust, walking meditation can help, just like I explained in the opening portion of this live stream. If you missed that, just drag the progress bar all the way to the left and it should replay that. But I want to bring something to your attention. Sturgeon's, oopsie, let me go over here real quick. I'm going to tap button, let's go over to button 2. And I'll go over here. This is 27. Control G 27. Okay. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, including meditation teachers. So there are meditation teachers who would tell you that if we have excessive lust, then we are spiritual failures. And those guys are 100% incorrect. They would say to you, these bozos would say to you, that we're not supposed to experience desire. No, the problem is not the presence of desire, it's the tyranny of desire. When tyranny hijacks our choices and our utterances and our deeds, it can lead us into all sorts of bad, painful, destructive, unsustainable situations. But there's a huge difference between the tyranny of desire and the presence of desire. So what are we to do with the presence of desire? Simple. As we inhale, we silently and mentally recite the verb watch. As we exhale, we silently and mentally recite the verb rest. But what does mere wordplay have to do with all this? Well, let's explore neuroscience. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we are wired to automatically access the middle bit of our spinal cord. See, most of the time, we go through life completely ignoring our autonomic nervous system, completely focusing on focusing and analyzing and living in fear and aggression. And this is the tyranny of these regions of our brain can really mess up our life. However, when we cooperate with our autonomic nervous system, we're able to use all the regions of our brain in the most sustainable way. So we're not being asked to open up our head with a saw and muck about with a melon baller and pull out parts of our brain. We're being told to use all the parts of our brain in the most sustainable way. And we do that by passively cooperating with our autonomic nervous system. So specifically, how does that help us with watching and resting? Every time we inhale, we have evolved to automatically access the middle bit of our spinal cord, which functions as the core of our sympathetic nervous system. It is evolved to help us to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice all mind's antics of sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like, including the full spectrum of human emotions, intentions, cognitions, recollections, and imaginings. All of them, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the convenient to the arduous, from the glorious to the grotesque. Now you might intelligently ask, what do we do with those things? And the answer is, we meditate. You see, every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access both the tippy top and the very bottom of that same spinal cord. These two regions, working as a team, function as the core of our parasympathetic nervous system, which has evolved to help us to physically relax and mentally release during our exhalation to such a degree that which we watched during our previous inhalation, yes, even desire, could feel fleetingly less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and even as non-graspable as a vast empty void. Now, simile, such as a vast empty void, is only as effective as it is relatable. Therefore, we must ask the question, what? What is a real-world example of a non-graspable vast empty void? How about the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although it could be tantalizing to the eye, feels non-graspable to the hand? So as we relax into our exhalation, all that we noticed during our previous inhalation could feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and less graspable, at least a little bit, at least for a moment, until our next inhalation, when the cycle begins afresh. So if no self and emptiness are just temporary, then what is the point of meditation? Is it to pick and choose what we experience? No. Is it to stop perceiving? No. The reason we practice the mindfulness and meditation that constitute the seventh and eighth folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path is because doing so is the key to mastering this Eightfold Path, which is tantamount to enlightenment itself. Perhaps that is why the Buddha taught in the second to the final passage of his discourse on the four bases of mindfulness that one could master this path in as little as 7 days, just by sitting and breathing and watching and resting once every 12 hours or so. We cannot help but viscerally notice impermanence and no self and emptiness. Just by sitting and breathing and watching and resting, we cannot help but experience greater, kinder intentions, kinder communication, kinder conduct, and kinder commerce. Simply by sitting and breathing and watching and resting, our choices and utterances and deeds, instead of being controlled by dread or desire, are guided, flow, not from contrived calculations, nor from wild scatterness, but instead from love's deeply centered spontaneity, which is known by many names, including right effort or effortless effort, or doing without doing, or wu wei, or going with the flow, or being in the zone, or expedient means. And all of these are the natural byproduct, not of concentration, not of contemplation, but of simply watching and resting in harmony with our breathing. Now, it can be very, very easy to say, well, I'm feeling like a big old horn dog, therefore I'm evil and simply must be destroyed. It's very, very easy to fall into that trap. However, the greatest Buddhist reformer, Prahevajra, taught that as we relax into our exhalation, whatever desire or contentment we watched during our previous inhalation could feel as if they were melting into the simplicity of just emotion. So as I mentioned a few moments ago, a second question is asked. So is better maintain chastity for you? So let's explore that. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, including meditation teachers. So the majority of meditation teachers are rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. They love rules, and they love vows, and they love condemning people. But 10% are not into institutional Buddhism, but proto-Buddhism. They're not into patriarchy, but matriarchy. And the only rule, they recognize that the key to the spiritual path is simply the Eightfold Path. And the key to the Eightfold Path is loving kindness. How important is loving kindness to the spiritual path? It comprises 50% of the Eightfold Path. The highest love is the spontaneous and uncontrived byproduct of simply watching and resting in harmony with our breathing. Now, I'm not talking about active focus and active contemplation because that messes things up and makes us anxious and cranky. I'm talking about passively cooperating with our autonomic nervous system in a way that helps us to effortlessly master the Eightfold Path. You'll notice in the Eightfold Path there's no mention of karma and there is no mention of vows. There's nothing rigid at all. It's all very flexible. Sit and breathe and watch and rest, and you can't help but master the Eightfold Path. Does that mean that everyone is going to applaud you every day, all day long? No. But when we are guided by the highest love, by the spontaneous and by the love that is the spontaneous and uncontrived byproduct of mindfulness and meditation, then our intentions and communications and actions and commerce will always be beneficial for ourselves and others in the long term. In the short term, we might not always feel comfortable. So for those who are literal-minded, for those who are rigid and literal-minded, they confuse the presence of desire with the tyranny of desire. Telling people to ignore their natural tendencies to drink water or eat food or make love or go to sleep is a great way to make them as nutty as a shithouse rat. That's why one of the greatest Chinese meditation teachers is famous for saying, when you're weary, rest. When you're hungry, eat. The inference was the path of enlightenment is not paved with asceticism. paved with the centered spontaneity that is the byproduct of sitting and breathing and watching and resting. In Buddhism, Buddhism's been around for more than 25 centuries and has had plenty of time to develop all sorts of iconography, all sorts of symbols. If you're watching me on the Tube app, behind me you'll probably notice a statue of two Buddhas doing the hibbity-dibbity. So in tantric art, it is not uncommon to see statues like that or variations of that theme. Some people. So let's look at the LGBTQIA community. The A stands for asexual. Some people are spontaneously asexual. They don't force it. It's just how they're wired. Some people are pansexual, which is the opposite of asexual, perhaps. They're attracted to every sexual permutation. They don't force it. It's just how they're wired. So instead of trying to rewire ourselves, instead of indulging our controlling tendencies, as we breathe in, we can notice how we're wired. As we breathe out, we can relax. It is during our inhalation that we realize truth, whether that truth is convenient or inconvenient. It is during our exhalation that we are freed from the tyranny of our destructive impulses. Throughout the history of Buddhism, there have been many meditation teachers, and there have been many nuns and monks who had tantric partners. Some of them were very open about it. Some of them were very deceptive about it. Some of them were very rigid and protective about it. Some of them were very vulnerable and relaxed about it. It was taught to me by my first Kagyu teacher that the young woman who brought Gautama a bowl of food while he was dying of needless asceticism in the forest went on to be his tantric partner. I don't know if that happened or not. That's just a story that was told to me by one of my many teachers. If you look hard enough, you can find a teacher to say just about anything. A teacher saying something is no guarantee that it's right or that it's wrong. The test of the teachings, the test of our behavior, is the effect it has on our spiritual path. Does certain behavior make it easier for us to be kind? Does certain behavior make it difficult for us to be kind? Do certain behaviors feed our tendencies? One moment, this will be helpful if I use a diagram. Do some behaviors feed our tendencies to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel? And do other behaviors feed our tendencies to be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind? One of the cool things about the Buddha's path is that it's designed to be mastered easily and quickly. Mastering the path does not mean you never feel a painful emotion ever again. Mastering the path simply means we've gotten so good at the Eightfold Path, that we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. All we need to know is how to sit and breathe and watch and rest, and everything else will take care of itself. Now, there's always going to be people who rejoice in making other people miserable. We call them elitist. We call them controlling. So it's very easy to find people who are miserable and want to make you miserable too. But please remember that the fourth enlightenment factor is joy. And if the path of concentration and contemplation makes you cranky and miserable and neurotic and self-loathing, then I recommend walking the Buddha's path of watching and resting. That is the quick path to peace and love and wisdom and freedom. I hope that helps. So let's get back to the main event. So I'm going to jump forward in the practice text. Now let us turn our attention to mindfulness and meditation of bliss and letting go. By the way, Samton, thank you for your question. It's a very subtle difference between the last exercise. As we feel our chest gently swell as we breathe in, let us silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb, feel. As we feel our chest subtly sink as we exhale, let us silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb, rest. It's very easy. So one could perform this meditation while sitting or walking or standing or lying down. One could perform this meditation while receiving or giving sexual pleasures, sexual favors. In the path of Buddhist Tantra, we choose the middle path, neither fleeing from orgasm nor chasing it, simply lovingly flowing from love-centered spontaneity, breathing and feeling and resting. Some might call this Anu Yoga. Some might call it completion stage. Some might call it Bindu Mahamudra. Some might call it Tokal. Let me get my Tibetan correct. Trekcho Tikle. Yeah, they may call it Tikle, not Tokal, sorry. Tikle. So the preponderance of synonyms for tantric sex infers that it is widely practiced, or at least was widely practiced at one time. There will always be a majority who try to make things as mysterious and difficult as possible. And there will always be a minority who make things as easy and organic and as possible. There will always be those who tell us that we must control our experience and either intensify orgasm or avoid orgasm, or the middle path is just to practice love's deeply centered spontaneity, whatever you're doing, whether you're clothed or naked, whether you're by yourself or with a partner. The rule is always the same. Use breathing and resting. Use breathing and feeling and resting to flow from love's deeply centered spontaneity. That is the path. Not everybody is going to approve of that. And everybody who approved of Lao Tzu, the author of the Tao Te Ching, not everybody approved of the Buddha. There were multiple assassination attempts on his life. And eventually one of those assassination attempts was successful. Not everybody agreed with the Christ. He was betrayed and tortured and murdered by the state. Doing the right thing in the right way at the right time is no guarantee that everybody's going to give us the thumbs up, but it does guarantee that our life will be much more loving and peaceful and wise and fulfilling. When it comes to Buddhist Tantra, remember 90% of everything sucks. 90% of teachers are stuck in institutional Buddhism and patriarchy, and only about 10% are into proto-Buddhism and matriarchy. There will always be those who are into ritualism and visualization. There will always be those who are trying to control what their channels, winds, and drops are doing, either through invocation or visualization or the sexual arts. However, there's a minority who just are really focused on sitting and breathing and feeling and resting. And these will tell you to flow from love's deeply centered spontaneity, not to chase visualizations, not to chase rituals, not to chase certain sensations, but to make feeling, sitting and breathing and feeling and resting our North Star. And let everything else take care of itself. I've sat at the feet of many teachers of sexual tantra, and I've learned as much from what they've done as far as it being useful, but also I've learned from what not to do. I've learned by their cautionary tales. I've learned that the path of controlling multiplies neurosis, whether it's controlling emotions or intentions or impulses, whether it's controlling one's partners or oneself or one's sensations or one's bank balance. Controlling is antithetical to peace and love. Remember, before the Buddha was the Buddha, when he was Prince Siddhartha, he was already acquainted with every debaucherous pleasure. He was already acquainted with power and pleasure and every delight of the senses. And after training with 2 teachers, he spent time in the forest with 5 ascetics and explored every asceticism. And he found asceticism as wasteful as debauchery. Instead, he trod the middle path of being governed not by dreads nor desires, but by love's by the deeply centered spontaneity of love that is generated by sitting and breathing and feeling and resting. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. For Meditate Like a Jedi is made possible thanks to the generosity of viewers just like you. In approximately 11 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's dusk practice of Meditate Like a Jedi. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.